This is an after picture, her state as she was back in May this year. We're going to go through the story of how we got to this position, to this place. So, the new Asile. This is about a renovation project. Those are my details. Feel free to contact me if you're interested in pursuing any aspect of this. I'm always happy to talk about Asile. So here's a little background who she is. Asile is a Westerly Pentland. Which is one of the Westerly 31s, along with the Berwick, Longbow, Renown. The Pentland. 241 of them were built, 1973 to 1980. Asile was one of the earlier ones. She has bilge keels. She's got a centre cockpit, and she has a ketch rig, a full complement of masts. 31 foot is the hull length, and the length overall. The ketch rig requires a small bowsprit, so she's actually 32.5 feet long, just under 10 metres. Beam is 2.9 metres, and it's remarkable. You won't find a modern boat that's 10 metres long whose beam is less than 3 metres. Very sea kindly. Draft with the bilge keels 1.1 metre. We can really go anywhere with this. The design displacement was 4.6 tonnes, solid westerly stuff. When we lifted out in 2012, I asked the crane driver how much she weighed. In full cruising gear, with everything aboard, she weighed 6 tonnes. The name, Asile. Asile was... she was originally christened Baal, I believe, on launching, but the person who sold the boat to us, John Rowntree, renamed her Asile, a suggestion by a friend of his. It's a French word meaning shelter or refuge, but it also means a retirement home and an asylum, quite a big word in French, so it seems appropriate. So we bought her in 2009 in Gosport in England, and we brought her home along the south coast and up the Irish Sea and into Bray. We kept her in Bray Harbour from 2009 onwards. During the early years, I did a fair amount of work, upgrading some systems and some repairs. And she took us to Scotland, she took us across to Wales, she took us around the south coast of Ireland, all over. Very solid. We're of course very pleased with her. So here's some photographs. I'll give some more background on those early years up to about 2015 or so. Can you all see a picture of Asile standing on the hard now? Give us a thumbs up. Thank you. This is Asile in the boatyard at Hornet Sailing Club in Gosport. This is our first view of her. I went across to inspect her. We went over and. We went over later in the summer after buying her and brought her back 1 week along the south coast of England. So it was windy. The wind was force 5 in the southwesterly, and we got some big waves in the channel. And we were sailing the boat harder than she had been sailed for many years.
Tuesday afternoon, 8 hours of tedious slogging to windward with the engine only, rewarded by a couple of hours of reaching.
That's nice. So we stopped into Weymouth to dodge some serious rain, and we put up the the cockpit tent for the first time. It's a huge space in there, effectively another cabin, another room. So we were very pleased with that side of Asile as well. It was new to us. Here we are motoring past the longships off Land's End. And from there we went straight up the Irish Sea with a strong wind directly behind us. Again, putting the boat through her paces. So that trip built up a lot of confidence in the boat. So I'm going to flip through those again. Yeah. Sorry about the noise. I haven't found a way to skip over those. Okay, so here's some on a Scottish visitor's mooring, having breakfast in Scotland. Well, you're all Westerly owners. You know the delights of these wonderful boats. The Eberspecher wasn't working when I bought her. The owner knocked off a bit, knocked off €1,500 for that. So I immediately spent it on a new Eberspecher and installed that in the engine room. I did some work on electronics, hooked up the Yeoman to the Yeoman chart plotter with various other bits. I installed a radio and AIS transponder. I'm still very pleased with the AIS transponder, still going, and we're very comfortable. It's good to be able to be seen by others as well. I had to replace the boat had been owned by a liveaboard couple in its past. So there were things like there was an extra water tank, the Eberspecher. There was there were four big batteries, all lead acid batteries, and they gradually deteriorated. And I replaced them. In the end, I replaced them all with AGM batteries. Installed an inverter. So that'll drive that drives hairdryers. It'll even drive a toaster. So we use a small cheap toaster rather than the grill. The electrical system is 24 volts. The starter motor is a Lucas starter motor, standard starter motor, but it's beefed up by design to take 24 volts. With some beefier brushes and so on, but this kept on letting us down and failing, and did that until I found and fixed a leak of diesel fuel, which was soaking the brushes. Once that was fixed, never had any trouble with the starter, but in the meantime I had to replace it several times, swapping in and out, sometimes at sea. The gearbox is a J-type gearbox. I think that's a military design. It's often used in military boats, and it's used on river boats as well. Simple forward and reverse, but it has a clutch. I didn't know it when we bought the boat, but the clutch needs to be adjusted at least a couple of times a year to take up the slack. I didn't, so I thought I was going to have to replace the gearbox when it suddenly stopped delivering any power, but acquired a manual instead of a new gearbox. And so over the years, I got to know an awful lot about the boat. To improve performance, I replaced the fixed three-bladed propeller with three-bladed propeller with a Brunton's auto prop, variable pitch propeller, and that was it cost as much as a suit of sails, but it was worth it. It made a huge difference to performance under engine, under sail. It's economical. It makes very good use of the engine. I would thoroughly recommend that to anybody who's to any sailing yacht. There it is. The blades rotate by themselves. There's no controls. They do it all because of the shape of the blades. I had a go at smartening up the interior. The headlining was drooping, as it will. I stripped it out and had a go in the fore cabin. I put on, this is 5mm closed cell foam, sticky on both sides. So I lined the fore cabin with that, and then replaced the original vinyl with all the rotten sponge scraped off the back of it, and glued that up underneath. But I didn't really know what I was doing, and it's not a pretty sight. It is effective though in the end. The Genoa furler got water into the bearings. They rusted and broke up. So I replaced those, sourced some bearings locally and reassembled the whole lot. Never given any trouble since. For short-handed sailing, I generally sail with Sue. There's often only one person on watch, especially when the sails are up. It's me. So I moved the winches back from the cockpit coaming, to the aft cabin. I can now sit. A seat goes into that hatch, and I can reach the wheel and the winches at the same time. It was a very successful modification. I replaced the old heavy spinnaker pole with two lightweight poles. These are actually windsurfer masts that were lying around. So I fixed those up with lots of string, and they provide a very stable way to manage stable and convenient way to manage the spinnaker. I mentioned damage in Bray Harbour. The boat takes the ground twice a day, and that's quite hard. We bent the rudder 3 times, and we had this damage to the keel as well. That's one of the new rudders. Notice the stainless steel shoe to protect the fiberglass from the stones in the mud on the bottom. Eventually, we moved after fixing the keel. We didn't go back to Bray. We moved the boat to Arklow, and we've been in Arklow Marina ever since, and very snug there. Again, thoroughly recommend Arklow Marina too. Very comfortable. So we got to 2015. And the boat's little tired, and we've already put some effort in, but we have a little money available, a couple of windfalls, and we're wondering what to do with the boat, whether to replace the boat, get a upgrade, get a bigger boat, or stick with Asile, or get a newer boat, or stick with Asile and put some proper money into her, and make her better. You know the way it went. So these are the advantages and disadvantages that we were considering from our point of view. Osmosis treatment was done by the previous owner as well. So we were looking at smartening her up, particularly the hull and deck. The hull and the deck had been painted in a hurry just before she was put on the market, and painted over, flaking, patchy paint underneath. Always looked pretty tatty. Sails were tired. The equipment and some of the running rigging was all a little tired. The headline drooping in the saloon. The kitchen, the galley in Asile's saloon is in an unusual place. It's at the forward end, apparently so that it doesn't get windy. It makes the layout of the saloon unusual, and entertaining a party around the table is difficult for us. But that's not such a big deal. We've rarely really find ourselves in that position anyway. So instrumentation, the auto helm was on its last legs, and she was not performing too well under sail. So we decided in 2015 that we would not sell her. Incidentally, the model we were looking at to replace her was a Westerly 33 ketch. That would have given us all the good stuff about Asile, plus a little bit more room and slightly wider side decks. But the chances of finding a good example and being able to sell Asile at all was looking like a year of heartache with no certain end to it, and except that we'd probably have to start all over again with an auto prop and osmosis and engine and stuff. So we decided to stick with it. So what I'm going to go through now is the major tasks, the major projects that I undertook between 2015 and 2020. We did the work over in several stages over many years, and trying to keep a balance between sailing the boat and fixing the boat. It's always important that the boat can repay the effort that goes into it. So there are periods of maintenance and periods of sailing, and periods of maintenance, periods of use. So I've got five episodes really. We'll have a quick run through the 5 episodes with just the slides, and then I'll go back more slowly and show pictures for each of these episodes. So first, from May to October 2016, the year after we decided not to sell her at all, we got some new sails, a new jib and a new mizzen, and some other work on the decks. That year we were in Peel with the Westerly Owners Association and on to the CAI, the Menai Straits. We had good use of the boat in 2016. So that winter, November 2016, we lifted out in Arklow, put the boat into the pen behind the clubhouse, a very good deal for that. And I took the engine out, gave it to Derek Reamsbottom to overhaul during the winter. And while the engine was out, I replaced the fuel tank and installed a fridge and replaced the auto helm. So we lifted in June and then went ready to go cruising off to the Isles of Scilly in June 2017. That wasn't to be, though, unfortunately. We got just outside Arklow and the gearbox packed up altogether. Couldn't be adjusted whatever I did to make it pull. So we abandoned that trip. We put the gearbox into the car and we drove to England, to the experts in the Thames, in the middle of England, where they refurbished the gearbox while we had a bit of a holiday. Brought the gearbox back and set off, and we were ready. We were ready then. A week and a half later, we still had some holidays, so we went up to Bangor and joined the Cruising Association. And so we worked. So everything worked fine, and we continued sailing until the next year. And in May 2018, we were cruising to Fishguard, and on the way back, the engine started smoking horribly and wasn't pulling right. We reckoned we'd lost at least one cylinder, so something had to be done. So the next episode then is addressing that problem. We got back to Arklow, lifted out. It's handy that Niall O'Toole, who runs the marina, also operated Arklow crane hire, so it's easy to arrange a lift out at a good rate. So I took the engine out again, put it on a pallet, packaged it up for transport and sent it off to the engine expert in Devon. He spent a month stripping it down, putting it back together, and sent it back on a pallet a month later. So we lifted in, and the boat was operational again, and we went up to the Firth of Clyde for a lovely 2-week cruise in 2018. So all was well. That winter then, after the trip to the Clyde in November, we decided to tackle the decks. It was time to get the deck painted. We thought at first that we would get away with just the cockpit, but in the end we got the whole thing done. So lifted out in November 1st of December in Malahide 2018, 3 years ago. 3 years ago today, in fact, I see. And the deal was the yard would do the painting and the preparation for painting, but I would strip off the fittings and get everything else ready for painting. They would do the painting, and afterwards I would put all the fittings back on. So it took me from November till May to get all the fittings off and get everything ready. Then the yard took her from May to July and painted her. After the boat was given back to us in July, I installed the deck fittings again. So again, working through the months, the August, September in 2019, the masts, so sidelining, the windows went back in. Leaky windows was a particularly annoying problem that we had to address. Got a spray hood, jib tracks in February. So then in March, things were going well, but then we got the COVID-19 lockdown and I lost access until June. Wasn't able to do any more. And meanwhile, I retired from work as well. So episode 5.3, after that enforced hiatus, got back in to continue with some more enhancements and improved the saloon, did the headlining job. And on the 7th of August, we launched finally in Malahide, nearly 2 years after she'd been lifted out. And we joined the cruise to Belfast. We went to Strangford Lough, first time we've been there, and cruised there, and got home to Arklow at the end of August. So that's where this story stops. I'm going to go back now to the beginning to May 2016 and show you some photographs as we go through each of these periods of maintenance, of stripping out, replacing, and renovating generally. I have over 200 photographs here. It's about 600 megabytes of boatyard porn for you. I hope you enjoy it. So this is 2016. She was sailing well. We have the sails are here. In fact, the sail. There's the new Genoa. The new jib is shown here. Notice the sheeting angle. It needs to be pulled down quite a lot further forward than the old Genoa was. The mizzen is furled here, hanging underneath the boom. I have a better arrangement now. Smartening up the inside was one of the objectives. This is the way look at the cockpit, at the saloon bulkhead here, looking forwards. Rather dull, dark brown wood. We fixed that on the other side simply by applying sticky back plastic. So that's Fablon. Made a huge difference to the lightness and feel of the saloon. Easy job, done in a couple of hours. Thoroughly recommend that too. These ventilators, ventilites, I think, have glass, which plastic inserts, which were initially just a little brownish, but became opaque over time. So I replaced them with some new inserts. They're easy enough to get hold of. I didn't do them all, but at the time, but I started on it. This is the arrangement for the new jib. So I temporarily got it barber hauled down to a stanchion base. One thing to notice here is the bollards. I replaced one rather puny cleat here on the side deck with a pair of more substantial angled bollards, raked bollards they're called. I like to have one rope for each of my springs, and I wanted them out of the way to make it easier to walk along the narrow decks. So we went to Peel in the middle of that year as well. There's a boat here that looks remarkably similar to Asile, but spot the difference? She's a little challenged in the mast department. Asile is actually further up in the marina. This one only has one mast. That's 2016. So, secondly, we've a lift out now and take the engine out and get Derek Reamsbottom to have a look at it. Fuel tanks and fridge. Quite a lot of work done in the winter of 2016 and through to the spring of 2017. Taking out the engine. This is in the yard behind the sailing club in Arklow. I've rigged a pulley system here, suspended from the spinnaker halyard at the top of the mast, hauled out along the boom by the slide that manages the in-mast furling. And there's a winch on the mast. So that's how I can raise and lower the engine and swing it out over the side. So this is what it looked like. There's a lifting eye already on the engine, so I simply had to shackle the tackle onto that. The engine has to slide forward, has to move forward out of the engine bay into the cockpit, into the saloon, which is a really tricky manoeuvre. It's very heavy, and the bridge deck is right over the top of it. So I had some difficulty, but I managed to work it forward onto a homemade stand there. Then lift it up, and it just about fits out through the cockpit hatch and into the cockpit. Then haul it aft along the boom and haul it up a little more over the guard wires, and then lower it to the ground and back onto the homemade stand. So I was doing that. I'm not sure exactly. Many of these operations I've done on my own. My son Dave has helped me from time to time. He might have been there on that day. So packaged up and ready to go. Meanwhile, inside the engine bay now, with the engine and gearbox gone, we have lots of room, lots of open space. The fuel tanks were leaking, both of them. Iron steel tanks, one either side, behind the engine, well pinned in by that. No chance of getting those tanks out while the engine was in. But with the engine out, lots of access. So first drain the diesel out, and then remove the tanks. When I did that, to do that, I had to remove the control cables as well, which come down the pedestal and bend forward to the gearbox and to the throttle. So those clearly needed to be replaced as well. That explained quite a lot of the difficulty I was having with gear changing and throttling. So I replaced those as well. Here's the rust on the fuel tank, and the pair of fuel tanks as removed. Notice the filler pipe goes in from the top. That emerges into the cockpit sole just aft of the wheel. A tricky job to replace that. Okay, so we've got this open space, all clear. You can see the fuel tank bearers at the back there. I didn't think that we needed 90 litres of fuel. I thought we could get away with somewhat less for the sake of an easier life. So I chose to replace those two saddle tanks with a completely different design, a single tank with a capacity of 70 litres from Tech Tanks. So Tech Tanks made up a drawing to my on the basis of my drawing and requests, and they sent, and from their drawing I built a tray, and they specified that you have to have a solid base for it. So I had to made up this tray and put it in place in the engine bay. This is looking forward from the aft cabin through the fuel tank space under the cockpit, through the engine bay and into the saloon at the front. Lots of space. It's all very accessible now. These control cables are the steering from the wheel on the pedestal, going down to the quadrant under the aft cabin. The Eberspecher is on the left. Here is the beautiful new tank. Big inspection hatch. There's the filler hole inlet at exactly the right place. We've got outlet and we've got the return. Over this side, the Eberspecher sips diesel out of the same tank, so it also has an outlet and there's a vent as well. The vent goes up to the air. There's also a sender for a gauge. We never had a fuel gauge before, so real luxury. Lovely job. I'm very pleased with that. The capacity there is 70 litres. So, okay, and this is what it looks like in place. There's a lot more room around it. That's before applying all the fittings. There's the filler cap. This work, all these fittings have to be done reaching forward or reaching aft from the engine bay, or reaching forward from the rather cramped aft cabin. So quite tricky work in that. But eventually it's all done. This is the starboard side, and this is the port side. I secured it in place not with this rope, but with a ratchet strap. That's the little pump for the Eberspecher heater. So, good job, very pleased with that, the fuel tank. We carry spare cans of fuel anyway, so we always have plenty, and 70 litres turns out to be quite a lot, so not a problem. Okay, we bought a fridge, aiming at longer cruising and tackling some of the domestic inconveniences. So we bought the biggest Dometic fridge that would fit, and the place we chose for it was a hanging locker opposite the heads, just aft of the galley. So I made these two shelves for the feet of the fridge, and the fridge just sits inside there. Easy to reach from the galley, out of the way. That cupboard wasn't really doing much for us anyway. We still have cupboard space above it and below it. Very pleased with the fridge too, and it's I wired it in. It's 24 volts, of course. Where possible, I use 24 volt equipment, and the current draw is less than 3 amps. That's the most it ever draws, and it's quite miserly. We don't have a problem with electricity for the fridge. Good. So the engine came back. That's Derek Reamsbottom. Don't know if anybody's had dealings with him. He used to do all the diesel engines south side. Arklow Crane Hire lifted it into the boat for me, and I put it into back into the engine bay. You see, I've rigged up a kind of overhead cable there, an overhead rope with a pulley running along it, trying to support the aft end of the gearbox as I manipulated it into place. The forward end is supported by a sling as well. So a bit better, but it lacks precision, and still had to use a bit of brute force levering and grunting to get it into place. But fortunately, I didn't break anything. And this is how it looks at the back. Another handy billy to adjust the height precisely. And there it is in place, the engine and gearbox in place. Before the cables are connected again. Okay. I did a few other smaller jobs during that winter and the spring. Replaced a stanchion base. You can get these from Trafalgar as well. I put in a gauge. Having seen how helpful it was to have a fuel gauge, I went the whole hog and put in a water gauge as well, so we know how much fresh water we had in the tank. I've never been a fan of open fair leads. When you're lying against a wall, the mooring lines can easily lift out of a conventional fair leads, so I wanted hawse holes or closed fair leads, and couldn't find any on the market, so I used these big 50mm U-bolts instead. This was an early experiment, and boat lifted in, and we were ready to go off for a great holiday. So, right. So episode. Oh yeah. Can you see my? Okay. That was 2. I've lost the. Okay, we're on episode 3. So then so we were ready to go on our holiday then to the Isles of Scilly. Never been there before. We were very much looking forward to it, and going in company with a boat called Tobago, Tom Ray and gang. So we all left. We were all leaving Arklow on the 21st of June, longest day, bright and early. We got outside Arklow and the gearbox failed, I say. So we happily, Tobago was able to give us a tow back into Arklow. So here's some photographs. This is Tobago towing Asile back towards Arklow. The slides didn't change when I used my arrows just now. Can you confirm that you can see a picture of a boat towing another boat? Thank you very much. So we were a little despondent about that. We gave them all the cheese that we were going to eat on the trip, and waved them off. Went back into the marina, lifted the boat out, and I took the gearbox out, leaving the engine in place. So there's lots of bits of wood under there wedging the engine in place, and just 4 nuts to undo on the forward end of the gearbox here, but those nuts are inside the gearbox. So if you drop one of those nuts while you're unscrewing it, it's going to fall into the oil in the bottom of the gearbox. Not so bad when you're taking it out, but if you do it when you're putting it in, that's a whole lot of heartache. So that's what the gearbox looks like when it's out and dribbling oil everywhere. So we put it into the, and this was the plan. So pleased enough to do it all in one day. From 11 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the evening, getting the whole thing out. So pleased with that. So we went to the heart of England, the River Thames, where the gearbox expert is, and stayed in Henley, the home of Braxbeer's beer. This isn't a poster on the wall. That's actually a picture through the window of the place where we stayed. Idyllic view of the Thames at Henley. An idyllic view of the contents of the bar at Henley. Anyway, we worked in there was a family event which we had to attend as well, a funeral. But so my brothers and I met there, and family. So we had, and then we made our way back after a week or so to Sheridan Marine, where they had refurbished the gearbox. They'd replaced all the plates in the clutch, and a couple of other bits, and were satisfied it was working well enough. Not quite as good as new, but certainly good enough for another 10 years. So they showed me how it works. They deliberately left it set up there so that they could show me the insides and show me how it needs to be adjusted and how tightly it needs to be adjusted. Apparently, this is a common problem. I hadn't adjusted it tightly enough, and the clutch had been spinning, which had made the discs hot, which had distorted them. So, so they gave it back to me, and we brought it home. We stopped off in Cardiff, where I used to live. That's transformed. It used to be all mud, but now it's a wonderful lagoon behind locks and lock gates. Recommend Cardiff. Anyway, we look forward to going there in the boat. One of the things they impressed on me in Sheridan Marine was to be absolutely scrupulous with the alignment of the drive shaft going into the gearbox. So I acquired a very sensitive dial micrometer, and set it up to verify that the drive shaft coming out of the engine is indeed running true. Worthwhile exercise, but I didn't have to do anything to make it work. Good. So the gearbox went back in, and we still had some holiday left. So on the 4th of July, we headed up to join our friends in Bangor. Not the holiday that we'd planned, but it turned out to be a good time. We had a good week up there in the Abercorn Basin. In the Abercorn Basin beside Titanic there. And so on. We sailed again during the summer and into the winter. The next and we're doing fine until the next spring. But in May 2018, we were in Fishguard. This is Fishguard. This is the lighthouse on the end of the pier. We had a lovely weekend there. We took the ground in the harbour, I believe, again. But on the way out, it was foggy. You see to the right of the lighthouse is a huge bank of fog. That fog bank lasted most of the way across the Irish Sea. And we were motoring, and there was no wind, so we motored carefully most of the way. We have sails up here. The wind did fill in later, but still foggy. But as I say, it was as we made that passage, we noticed a huge amount of smoke coming out of the engine and a loss of power. So we decided something would have to be done about the engine, so to. So back to. We did lift out Asile the 1st of June. We did actually consider replacing the engine. I talked to the agent for Beta Marine, who assured me that there was a complete drop-in replacement. That was a no-brainer for about €3,000, and would give us a lifetime service with no trouble at all. And he also offered me the salesman statistic that 90% of the engines that were refurbished for a couple of €1,000 were replaced with new Beta engines within 1 year. And I was determined to prove him to be the exception to that. So anyway, we weighed it up, and we reckoned that because Robert Hinkston at Stevenston Marine still operates an exclusive water motor Sea Panther workshop and finds enough business to make it worth his while, that we should give him a go. Certainly, without that resource available, it wouldn't have been. We wouldn't have been worth refurbishing. So, okay. So we lifted out, and again, getting the engine out of the boat again, engine and gearbox. I think I took out the engine this time, but not the gearbox. Again, some rope, even tighter, to try and provide a rail to suspend the engine as it slides forward and back. It was a little bit better, but not very accurate. So the engine came out onto a pallet, and it turns out that you can get anything on a pallet shipped to the UK for 130 odd euro. I was amazed at how easy it was to get an engine moved from here to Devon and back again. So that's going, and that's coming back on the pallet. So the work Robert did was to replace one piston, to replace most of the piston rings, the others, and to replace oil seals. I think he replaced. I don't think he replaced any of the. I don't think he had to replace any of the bearings. So anyway, good. And he worked on the top end as well. So putting the engine back in now, because the gearbox is still in the boat. You can just about see it there in the engine bay. Those 4 bolts have to line up. On the back of the engine have to line up very precisely with those 4 holes in the gearbox. So I needed something better than the bit of rope. So I made a beam out of some. Stainless steel tubes that I had lying around. Suspended the beam at fore and aft, and then suspended the engine from it on straps. This worked extremely well, and I was able to slide the engine aft under great control and adjust its height at the front and the back very precisely. So I was able to mate the holes with the bolts very accurately. This is what the back looks like. So I was pleased with that. Finally cracked that. Hopefully I won't have to take the engine out ever again, but if I do, this is the way I'll do it. There we are in place. Good. Okay, so and we're back on the water again and ready to go sailing. So up to the Firth of Clyde in 2018. Very good. Episode 4. So episode 5. Yes, my timing is bad, I'm afraid. I am going to overrun. We're into the big work on the decks now, stripping out, painting, and refitting. So lots and lots of pictures. I'm going to move little faster through these, but make a note of anything that particularly catches your attention, and we can come back. We'll come back to it afterwards. So. So out of the water in Malahide Boatyard. This is the state of the deck before the work. The sloppily applied deck paint was coming loose, flaking off. There's crazing in the gel coat on the side of the spray hood, and in many places in the cockpit as well. Pretty tatty. So this is part of the way through. The foredeck is cleared. I took out all the fittings. I filled in holes that I wasn't going to need again. I was determined not to replace the huge, great cleat in the middle of the foredeck, or at least I was keen not to. So patching it up. These holes where the pulpit go through the deck were a little bit spongy and a little bit dipped, so I made those good. I filling the cavities with resin. To take lots of photographs to make sure the wires go back in the right place. This is the cockpit. There's a redundant speaker there. There's a vent in the side. You can see the holes where I removed the winch to move to the aft cockpit. A lot of crazing. So all the holes filled and made good. This was my part of the deal. I removed altogether the ventilator for the aft cabin. We don't use the aft cabin except for storage anyway, so I filled that hole too. Okay, so I took off there was a short track here for the mainsail, which never really worked very well, but all the fittings are off in any case, ready for painting. There's the push bit is gone, and this is the state in which I handed her over to the yard to paint. Notice the windows are still in place. They masked off the windows. I certainly had to do work on those after, but I would have needed to replace them with something else anyway. So clear and ready to go in. Oh, this forehatch has an unpainted bit of bare fiberglass, which lets some illumination into the fore cabin. It looks awful on the outside, and we didn't need the light, so we decided to paint over that. That's the so this is before preparing for painting. This is some of the high build primer that they applied first. The yard did an excellent job. I'm very pleased with it. Several coats of primer, two coats of paint, and then the deck paint as well. Meanwhile, rewiring the mast was another project that I wanted to get done at the time. So I pulled through some new cable while the mast was out. This is the in-mast furling system. I have a new, rewired these that deck light and the steaming light. I have some new antennas here. This one is for internet. It's a GSM antenna from Internet Aboard, and at the top, replacing some of the fittings. Rather old. Washed all the ropes, of course, the running rigging. All right, and that's it. Ready to hand over to the yard. Okay, so episode 2. While the after they gave it back, I had to install the deck fittings. We put the mast back on. So and more fittings. So this is the way she looked after painting. gorgeous, shiny, like new. That's 2 coats of all grip on top of lots of primer, and International Interdeck non-skid deck paint on top. Baltic blue is the colour. I didn't remove all the wood. They masked this off, but they did a great job of that as well. So even the bits you can't see. This is a really complicated cockpit, and they did a magnificent job of painting it. Hardly any, no mistakes, hardly any blemish. You really got to look hard to see anything amiss with this. So. The other pieces, the detached pieces, got the same treatment. You remember the crazing on the side of the hatch cover? Not crazed anymore. Beautiful. So I've started. So I started putting things back on while it's in the shed, but it's moved out of the shed soon, and I have to cover up the space where the window, because I'm taking the windows out now. So push bits on. There's an anchor roller for the aft at the stern. There's the winches back on. I replaced these the old Tufnell cleats with some proper Harken gear. New stanchion bases and new stanchions all round. New guard wires as well. The lifelines are new, done at the same time as the standing rigging was replaced. There are 2 new fair leads on the bow, huge ones. I'm very much more comfortable and happier with those. So the holes where the windows were. This was one of the main jobs we wanted to get done. The headlining. We tossed up getting it professionally done, but decided to go ahead on our own. On the advice of Hawk House, who supply detailed instructions. Follow the instructions, and it just works. This is what I didn't know when I tackled the fore cabin. But with all this wisdom, I drew a line. You draw a horizontal line on the surface to where you're going to apply it, and a corresponding line on the sponge vinyl, foam-backed vinyl, which you've already cut too big. You line them. You put some glue onto the undersurface, and you spray some glue onto the foam, and then you bring them together carefully and quickly. You only get one shot at that. When you've done that, you smooth it down with a roller, and this is what it looks like. It's immediately stuck. Just cut out the holes where the windows go, and strip a little bit of sponge from the back of the lining, and that's the job. I didn't get it perfect first time. This is a bit of a blemish, but you'll hardly notice that in the boat now. So, okay. This is the other side. Similar problem. And the woodwork is spruced up as well. A bit of staining in the woodwork too, to improve the look of that. So we have windows then to do. Now I took out all the windows. They're held in place with interscrews. You take them out. You split the frames off. Then clean up the glass and clean up the frames, which can be a horrible job. I had used Sikaflex 291 to try to address the leaks, and regretted it when it came to cleaning up this. It can only be removed mechanically, so a pain. But I cleaned them up, and then got this. The rubber sealing strip comes from Trafalgar. For windows in 1973 Pentland, this is the sealing line. Later models of the 31s used a different profile of rubber. but this works well. So you cut a piece of rubber to size, and then you line it up, and then you force the frame down onto it, and split the and with practice you make cuts in the corners as well, so it doesn't rack up like that. But it wasn't too difficult. It took a day or so to reassemble these and get them all sealed, and then put them in and use interscrews to fix them back in. You can't get the interscrews of the original size, but you can get them just a little bit bigger. So I made the holes a little bit bigger and used the new ones, new screws all round. This is not waterproof. To make it waterproof, you still need to do some more work, and you've got to apply some sealant around the outside. But it looks gorgeous. Anyway, we got a new spray hood made up by Harry Sterling to a design that he and I came up with as we scratched our heads on the boat in the marina, in the boatyard. He went away for a couple of months and came back with the finished design. So the front is a single clear plastic window, and it unzips all the way around to lie down. You can actually pull it out of the channels as well. So and of course the whole thing still lies down if we need it to, folds forward. Did do a job on the woodwork. I used Teak Wonder, which has a cleaner and a brightener and a sealer. It's our son Dave helping me out again. So we treated all the wood, and the teak looks better than it ever did. I couldn't lead one of the antenna cables down inside the mast, so I led it down the outside. Found a suitable line, squirted some Sikaflex 291 into it, and made a virtue of its stickiness to retain that in place. And it hasn't moved since. The masts went back on. I got some more of these fair leads made up at a stainless steel fabricator, and applied them to and fitted them to the gunnels at the sides. Yeah. So each spring now has its own fair lead and its own cleat. Notice also there's a new track there for the 100% jib. So, 5.2. This is the last episode of pictures. So some more enhancements before we lifted in August, ready to go cruising. So photographs. So, and shore power burst. We'd always had a 3-pin socket dangling at the end of a piece of wire through the top of the washboards. Not very professional. Now we have a proper socket to attach the shore power cable. That leads up into a galvanic isolator, which sits in the earth wire, while the live and neutral bypass it, and stops stray currents from the marina. That goes around the locker with a bit of protection for the cable and through into the saloon, where it goes into a standard domestic unit with 2 RCD devices. One of those protects these sockets for general use, and the other one protects the battery charger. The battery charger is on whenever we're plugged in. There's no separate switch for that. So there's one other thing to notice in this photograph. Up at the top there is the GPS antenna for the AIS transponder, which is below it. It turns out, I have found, that locating a GPS antenna underneath a bit of fiberglass is just as effective as locating it on the outside, or out on the pulpit, or out on the pushpit, or anywhere else less convenient. So that works for me. I did some more work on the internal power distribution. I've now got 12-volt power going forwards to this distribution box, and similarly going aft into the aft cabin, and some new USB sockets here for charging stuff. If you stare at this for a bit, you might recognise flaky anti-fouling paint. This is indeed the bottom of the boat with a hole in it, nice round hole where the log impeller used to be. It wasn't working reliably, so I replaced it. The replacement can be made to fit into the old housing, but since the boat was sitting there on the yard, I thought I'd go the whole hog and use the new housing as well as the new impeller. So it turned out not to be hard at all. Same size hole, and just seal it in place and screw it in, and that's the way it looks inside. These were that. So the last big job is the headlining, really, and first plug a leak that I didn't know was there before, and strip off all the old glue using an abrasive disc on a drill, and put up new headlining, new foam-backed vinyl using the same technique with one line along the middle. It's best to do this with help, so there were two of us doing this. So once you trim it back, this is what it looks like. I left the centre line without the old wooden strip for the sake of my head, and because it didn't seem to be necessary. There is still some wooden trim to be put on along here, so it doesn't look as untidy as that all the time. Notice also that I applied Fablon on the other side of the cockpit, so nice and bright there on the other side of the bulkhead. We painted the fridge locker. Should have been done before the fridge went in, but there we are. I rerouted this is the furling line for the Genoa. It used to come across the deck here, through a hole there, straight across here and straight across the foredeck. It was terribly inconvenient and quite unsightly. So I got some leads and led it along the outside of the stanchions on the port side and all the way to the back to a turning block and a cleat, so it can be operated. It can be let out or let in by the helm or crew from the cockpit, and doesn't get in the way. Here's the foredeck. The fair leads I showed you before, but now I've added two huge bollards as well. These will take the weight of the boat if necessary, if we if it need to be towed or tow anybody, whatever. So they're not going to let us down, and you put big chains around them as easily as mooring lines. So the foredeck is now clear. There's also a chain stopper here, something I've always wanted. I'm very pleased with that too. It saves a lot of. It saves having to put the chain around a cleat to stop it. Here I was trying to design something to make the anchor sit in the bow roller conveniently. So a design session. I bought another VHF radio with an AIS and hooked that up to the second antenna on the mizzenmast. This is an alternative to the command mic, which for the other radio, which stopped working. I led the cables from the mast differently through a different new pair of holes in the deck into the heads, so where they're much easier to manage. These are the connectors. They're now below the deck, and I just have some simple glands on the deck instead of the old plug and socket arrangement that were there before. Just tidy up the wires, and that's the way it looks now. That was a worthwhile job, much more convenient. We got the name on the back for the first time ever, so she can be identified. And this is what it looks like indoors, inside now, after all the inside work. Launched in Malahide. Some new canvas all round. That's a new mizzen cover. New cover for the seat, for the helm seat. All looking very spruce. This is the arrangement I came up with in the end for the foredeck. That piece of wood is screwed to the wood underneath, and it balances the anchor in such a way that the knuckle doesn't get stuck when you upend it. Anyway, works well. And there she is, finished and ready to go sailing. So we headed off north to Belfast. There's the new jib. There's new running rigging as well. This outhaul and inhaul for the roller furling is new. The kicking strap is new. All working much better. And the new spray hood as well, of course. We also acquired instrumentation. There's a Ray Marine multifunction display and chart plotter. So we went to Belfast, still the party boat, and we went to Strangford Lough. This is Coyle Yacht Club. Idyllic day. So that's it for the photographs. Indulge me for a couple more minutes, and I'll run through a couple of conclusions without any great detail. Was it worth it? Well, what do we have? We got Asile is undoubtedly smarter. She's faster with the new sails. She's more reliable. The engine and gearbox work. We have better instrumentation. We have much better electrical installation, both shore power and 12 volts. I am intimately familiar with just about every inch of the boat. There's very little there that I haven't removed and put back. How much did it cost? Cost a lot. Didn't cost any more than we expected. Remember, we were considering this work was undertaken in the context of buying a new boat. So not more than we could afford and not more than we expected. I can give you a couple of bills in a moment as well. The amount of effort I put in, loads, of course, but that's the fun. It's very rewarding, the work, to come out the other end with a boat as good as this. The amount of time out of use, we lost time on the boat. We lost more than we expected. The 2 years in Malahide Boatyard was longer than expected, but then I suppose some of you were laid up for longer than expected in 2019 and 2022. Plenty of payback. We expect we've got a boat that'll take us loads of places. Here's a list of some of the suppliers that I used for future reference. All of these I would recommend. There's the Alpha Decal did the boat name, pallet network. The custom control cables came from Cable Tech in Nottingham. They made them up from scratch for me because the old cables were not off the shelf or no longer available. I ordered the foam-backed vinyl from Hawk House, as I said, but they weren't able to ship the adhesives to Ireland. going abroad. Apparently it's against the rules, so I had to source those locally. I found a place in Monaghan that did exactly the thing. And Connolly Precision Engineering in Fairview made up my bits of hardware. Here are some of the bills. The bill from Malahide Yard for the painting and associated work was just under €8,000. Refurbishment by Stevenson Marine, the engine, was £3,000. Derek charged me £1,200. Mast and rigging Ireland replaced some of the rigging. I had in 2011 I replaced the outer shrouds, the backstay and the forestay on the main mast, but left all the rest for later. Well, this is what later cost. So these are the lowers on the main mast and all the rigging on the aft mast and lifelines all round. Harry Sterling for the canvas, Connolly for the fairleads. The tank, the fuel tank, cost £667. That's all. I reckon that's okay. And various other bits. So that's it. Repair is noble. If you can repair it, you should repair it.